Good afternoon. I want to pull things down a little bit here, take you back about 2 years to August 2010, a few weeks before the 9th anniversary of the terrorist bombing of the Twin Towers. You remember that late spring, a controversy arose in the public media on the Park 51 project, an intention to erect a Muslim cultural center a few blocks away from the Ground Zero site. You remember that conflict included, or was sort of engendered by some anti-Muslim groups, particularly bloggers, and a group called Stop Islamization of America, SIOA. They were continued to carry an agenda arguing that Muslims and Islam is trying to take over America, to Islamicize America, and is very much trying to undermine traditional American values and so forth. They opposed the production or the erection of the what they called the mosque, on the grounds that it violated the sanctity of the Ground Zero site. They were opposed then by, or the people who supported Park 51, tended to do so on the constitutional grounds that we have freedom of religion in the United States, and that that the Muslim Americans had every right to build wherever any other religious group would have been allowed to build. The thing that struck me as a historian of religion and a historian of religion space is that this was one of the few spatial arguments that I've ever heard in the public media. It was about space. It was about proximity. How close was this cultural center going to be built to Ground Zero? 2 blocks away, 3 blocks away? It needs to be moved a mile. It should not be within the shadow of the Twin Towers. What is it? Is it a mosque? Is it a cultural center? What is it? So it's about space and architecture, which is not the kind of conversation that gets into the media very often. So as I was listening to these reports, it struck me that the one component that was not being discussed was the one that was at the heart of it, and that was, of course, the Ground Zero site. When Ground Zero was mentioned, if it was mentioned, it was very infrequently there was. When it was mentioned, it was called sacred space, sacred ground, and that's it. Everybody knew what it was. It was not interrogated. It was sort of hands off of Ground Zero. So I'm here today to actually talk about Ground Zero as a sacred space, and to help us to start to think spatially about contests in public, not only over religious space, which is my area of expertise, but other types of spaces too. If we think spatially about these things, I think we might be able to find some ways out of some issues we're having. So what is a sacred space? Everybody has a gut feeling what a sacred space is. It might be a religious building. It might be a landscape. It might be a place where you feel a sort of transcendental connection and understanding of a divinity. It might be a space where you feel a particular connection to historical religious figures. There's all sorts of different types of sacred spaces. It might be a memorial site, it might be a battlefield. And yet we know that it's experiential. We also know that sacred spaces are constructed. We make sacred space. We sacralize spaces in order to make them sacred. We set them apart by doing certain things to them. And make them into special places. So they're constructed, but they're also contested. Frequently, religious sites become the symbol of a group that is an out-group, or that is the enemy of a particular group, and so they attack the religious sites. We've seen this over and over again. Just a few examples. During the Civil Rights Movement, of course, the Jewish temple in Atlanta was bombed. The firing, the arsons at African-American churches has been not uncommon in the late 20th century. Vandalization of religious sites is fairly common. Even here in the Twin Cities, the Hindu temple was vandalized, I think it was in 2005, shortly before it opened. So contestation is frequent in religious sites. And it's not a new phenomenon either. This is a Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, a new shot. But mid-19th century, 1846, Easter Sunday, this site became the site of contestation. It was administered by both Roman Catholics as well as Eastern Orthodox. On that year, the Eastern Orthodox and the Catholic Easter was on the same day. The Orthodox priests got to the site of the Holy Sepulchre. This is the site where Christians understand that Jesus was entombed and resurrected, so it's a very important church. Orthodox got there first, laid their altar cloth across the table, set up the candlesticks ready for their services. The Catholic priests got there a little bit later, found that the site was already claimed, and a fight broke out between the priests. Monks participated in this. There were 10,000 of pilgrims in the area, and they participated as well. 40 people lay dead by the end of this melee that occurred. So this is not a new phenomenon, and of course there's sites all over the world that are contested. Well, let's get back to the Ground Zero site here for a minute and think about how that played out. First, there was this zero-sum ideological debate going on, anti-Muslim or U.S. Constitution, freedom of religion. A lot of people felt a little uncomfortable with both of those situations, or both of those positions. And so a middle ground, what was called a middle ground perspective, was created. Archbishop Timothy Dolan suggested, well, really it's a matter of courtesy. Out of respect, the Muslim American community should move their building farther away. And that would just be respectful. It would be less offensive to the site of Ground Zero. Well, what does that mean? What did that idea of respect actually mean? What is this sacred shrine? What is it about this sacred space that needed this type of respect? Well, as I said, sacred sites are created. They are sacralized in various ways. And the Ground Zero site had been sacralized in at least 4 different ways that I want to talk about. So we're looking at the sacralization of the Ground Zero site. The first way it was sacralized, of course, was through the blood of the victims. A horrific event happened there, and many, many people died. It was a terrible event. And it was the blood of the victims that sacralized. Think about Lincoln and the Gettysburg Address, talking about how nothing can harrow that ground more, nothing can sanctify the ground more than the blood of the soldiers who... It's the same way with Ground Zero. It was that horrific event that sacralized it, first and foremost. Secondly, however, it was sacralized by what was understood by many to be a miraculous event. About a week after the terrorist attacks, those folks who were involved in cleaning up, basically, one of the salvage workers found this cross, saw 2 crossed I-beams, saw it as a Christian symbol, ran and got a priest, and came back, and the legend of the cross at Ground Zero was built. That legend grew and grew. A feature film was made out of the legend of the cross of Ground Zero, and that film has been shown at Christian churches across the country ever since then. So this is a second way this ground was sacralized. It was also sacralized by the architects and the developers who were charged with rebuilding the site. They talked about rebuilding in terms of retaliation. This is going to be America reasserting its predominance and its values in Americans in the global context. By building bigger and better, we were going to retaliate for this awful attack by Al-Qaeda. And lastly, the site was sacralized within the context of American civil religion. That is that context that we're so well aware of in patriotic songs and so forth. The idea that there's a divine plan that America is involved with or a part of, that God is really supportive of the American society. So given these areas of sacralization, we can see that it's very much about America, not surprising, but it also has a fairly strong Christian tone. Now, that Christian tone doesn't have to be excluding, but for folks like the Stop Islamization of America, now on there, Stop Islamization of America, found it relatively easy to insert their particular agenda into and make it align with these ways that Ground Zero had already been sacralized. One other point about the site itself. When we think about what the site looked like on August 1st in 2010, it was a construction site. It was a hole in the ground. There was very little there. Construction had essentially stopped for most of the summer. There was very little hope that things were going to move on. It was really a wound. It was a wound that people felt that they needed, that was vulnerable. People felt they needed to exhibit custodianship for it. They needed to protect this wound in the ground from any further threat. And thus, again, for those folks who wanted to raise an issue about a Muslim American building, this was an easy way to sort of map it onto. Well, most people, as I said, in the media missed the spatial elements, missed this idea that this was really about the Ground Zero. But a few people picked it up. A few people got it, and amongst those who got it was Mayor Bloomberg, who after that 9/11 anniversary in 2010, must have moved heaven and earth to make sure, to get construction going again, to make sure that a year later, 10 months later, a respectable memorial was there, so that this sort of vacuum, difficulty meaning would no longer be available for those who wanted to insert their own meanings onto it. So by the 10th anniversary of 9/11, the monument was there, the memorial was there, and we did not hear these types of concerns. Now, the point that I want to make with this is that in certain instances, ideological perspectives and spatial realities and meanings can come together to create very powerful arguments. And whereas we're pretty sophisticated in thinking about the ideological components, we're not very good at thinking about the spatial components. And frequently, it's the spatial components that I think can help, as in this situation, kind of at least give us a path to move towards resolution, to fixing some of these situations. Not only as in that example, but in the many examples of contestation over religious spaces globally. It's a little too late, obviously, for the Bimyan Buddhas, but there are many other sites under contestation. The Wailing Wall, the Jewish Wailing Wall at the Western Wall in Jerusalem, Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. Native American sites across the globe, indigenous sites are in contestation. And sites much more closer to home, maybe even the mosque down the street. So again, thinking about not only ideological elements of contestation, but spatial elements, I think can move us towards finding resolution. Thank you.